Have you ever seen a watch that is half electric and half mechanical? Back in the 70s, Bulova had one called the accutron. Here's a close-up look of the gears right next to the battery. You might ask yourself, why would you want an electric watch with all these gears in it? Typically, when you look at a quartz watch, the second hand moves very abruptly. When a watch like this would run, the second hand would be very smooth. You can see how small and delicate these gears are. This is kind of like a combination of the old watches that had rubies or gemstones inside. These little red areas right here are sapphires or rubies. Each one of these gears would pivot right on one of those rubies. Because the ruby is very hard, it's almost like a frictionless area. Here would be a typical watch battery. The parts are so small on this watch, you have to make special tools like these little screwdrivers out of old nails. To keep these screwdrivers honed up so they grab those little screws, you can take 400 grit sandpaper and just hone them so when you go in there, they grab right into the screw perfectly. You can see how small those screws are. Here we can pull the movement out of the case. When I turn this small little gear right here, the second hand will move. I'll spin that little gear so you can see the second hand is connected to it. Here's a couple large electrical coils right here. This little screw right here on the side, when you loosen that, it'll let the dial come off. There's a screw like this on either side of the watch. This screw tightens right up against this peg. Once this is loose, you can pull off the face. We'll pull off the hands, we'll gently pry up on them. Now with those screws out, we can lift up the dial. Here we can take a look at the date wheel. Without these perfectly fit screwdrivers, this would be almost impossible to pull apart. With some of the screws removed, we can really start to take a look at some of these electronic parts of this watch. It looks like little capacitors and resistors. Right here's a coil that comes right off. This would be like an iron core. You don't see quality like that anymore. Can you imagine what it took to build something like this? When Henry Ford was a child, he built little screwdrivers so he could take little watches apart like this out of nails. We'll pull off this date dial. There's 3 screws in here. We can pull off this top plate. Just look at the craftsmanship in there. Here we can pull off the date dial. You've got these extremely small levers and springs. You wouldn't expect gears like this in a battery watch. Some of these gears are like paper thin. Here's a close-up of those gears. Amazing how delicate this stuff is. Right here is the gear that would hold the hour hand. It's like an entire world in there. You can see these little cast or machined brass pegs that hold everything together. When these screws are real tight, sometimes you have to get the screwdriver in there, press really hard, and then turn the entire watch. These screwdrivers have to bite in there really good and strong. You can see this yoke spring right in here. As you push it, the spring is right along in here, and they usually go flying when you go pulling them out. We've got that spring just about pulled out of here. Imagine the manufacturing that it would take to make something that small and that precise. Look at that gear, you can barely see the teeth on it. It's almost like these little rubies are pressed in. Now these are synthetically grown rubies. Rubies would be aluminum oxide or called corundum. On the hardness scales, ruby or sapphire would be a 9 and a diamond would be a 10, so you can see how hard they would actually be. All the pieces are almost off of this bridge. Here's the 2 largest portions of the movement. Here's a close-up look at those rubies. Here's a look at one of those gears with the staff in the ruby. This arrangement is almost a frictionless environment. When you hear of a watch that says 17 joules, this is what they're talking about. Now that is an engineering marvel. Here's a watch that's both mechanical and electrical.